6:18 a.m. Taiwan Strait. Chinese Type 055 destroyer establishes patrol line 24 nautical miles from Taiwan coast. Not a freedom of navigation transit. Not a routine exercise. A simulated blockade using live warships and real cargo vessels as test targets. 47 merchant ships diverted from standard shipping lanes. Armed Chinese Coast Guard cutters boarding commercial vessels. PLA Navy destroyers enforcing exclusion zone with active weapon systems. The rehearsal for economic strangulation that could devastate Taiwan without firing single shot. U.S. 7th Fleet detects the exercise within minutes. USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group alters course. 63 FA-18 Super Hornets launch from deck. 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers increase speed to 30 knots. The American response that turns Chinese exercise into superpower confrontation. Welcome to Warfare Signal, where we analyze the flashpoints that could trigger global conflict. Taiwan Strait, December 2024. World's most dangerous waterway. 23% of global container traffic passes through 110-mile-wide channel. $2.6 trillion in annual trade. Semiconductor shipments worth $140 billion. The economic choke point connecting Asia to world markets. China calls it domestic waters. Taiwan calls it international strait. United States calls it free navigation zone. The jurisdictional dispute backed by naval forces from 3 sides. December 14th exercise tested China's ability to close that choke point without invasion. The operation began with subtle coordination. Chinese Maritime Safety Administration issued navigation warning. Routine maintenance on underwater cables. Ships advised to avoid specific coordinates. Standard bureaucratic language hiding military exercise. Commercial vessels complied initially. Cargo ships adjusted routes. Tankers modified schedules. Container vessels accepted delays. Nobody questioned Chinese maritime authority in waters Beijing claims. Then the warships arrived. What's your assessment of blockade as warfare strategy? Type A, if economic pressure alone can achieve objectives. Type B, if blockades always escalate to shooting war. 6 Type 055 destroyers established patrol grid across Taiwan Strait. Each 13,000-ton guided missile destroyer carrying 112 vertical launch cells. Total firepower, 672 anti-ship and air defense missiles. The naval barrier that turns international waters into exclusion zone. Behind destroyers, 12 Type 052D destroyers in supporting positions. Range, 150 nautical miles from primary patrol line. Mission, defend blockade force against air attack and submarine penetration. Weapons, HQ-9 surface-to-air missiles, YJ-18 anti-ship missiles, anti-submarine rockets. Overhead, 16 J-20 stealth fighters maintaining combat air patrol, armed with PL-15 air-to-air missiles. Range, 200 kilometers. The air superiority umbrella protecting surface vessels from Taiwan's F-16s. But the critical element wasn't military vessels, it was Coast Guard cutters. China Coast Guard deployed 34 vessels across shipping lanes, not warships exempt from commercial interference. Coast Guard vessels with legal authority to board civilian ships for safety inspections under Chinese maritime law. The legal gray zone where military blockade disguises itself as law enforcement. Boarding operations began at 8:47 a.m. First target, container ship MV Hong Kong Prosperity, Marshall Islands Registry. Cargo, electronics from Taiwan to United States. Chinese Coast Guard team boarded under authority of Navigation Safety Verification. Inspection lasted 4 hours. No cargo seized, no crew detained, but vessel delayed and data collected on cargo manifest, crew composition, and shipping schedule. The intelligence gathering masquerading as safety inspection. Second target, Taiwanese cargo vessel Ocean Fortune. Legitimate Taiwan-flagged merchant ship carrying semiconductor equipment. Chinese Coast Guard ordered vessel to stop. Captain refused citing international law. China Coast Guard cutter blocked path with threat of ramming. Ocean Fortune stopped, Boarding team climbed aboard. Inspection began. Taiwan's Coast Guard administration protested immediately, called Chinese boarding act of piracy, demanded immediate release, threatened military response if crew harmed. Beijing responded calmly. Routine maritime safety operations in Chinese territorial waters. The diplomatic language that reframes blockade as administration. Stay with me, because this is where U.S. involvement begins. USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group was 340 miles east conducting routine operations. Commander 7th Fleet received intelligence brief on Chinese exercise at 7:23 a.m. Initial assessment: monitor but don't interfere. That assessment changed when Chinese Coast Guard boarded third vessel, U.S.-flagged cargo ship Liberty Star carrying commercial goods from Japan to Taiwan. American crew, American flag, American vessel, Chinese boarding team climbing aboard in international waters. Pentagon authorization came within 12 minutes. USS Carl Vinson Strike Group, proceed to Taiwan Strait. Assert freedom of navigation. Defend U.S.-flagged vessels from unlawful interference. The escalation that transforms exercise into confrontation. What would you do commanding that carrier strike group entering contested waters? Comment your tactical approach below. December 14th, 11:34 a.m. USS Carl Vinson crosses into Taiwan Strait from eastern approach. 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, USS Chung Hoon, USS Kidd, USS Higgins, in formation 8,000 yards apart. Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Lake Champlain providing air defense coordination. Total American firepower: 484 vertical launch cells, 320 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 164 SM-2 and SM-6 air defense interceptors, plus 63 FA-18E Super Hornets on Carl Vinson's deck, each carrying 8 tons of ordnance. The naval task force that outguns Chinese blockade flotilla. Chinese response was immediate. Type 055 destroyers activated fire control radars. J-20 fighters increased combat air patrol sorties. Submarines reportedly moved to intercept positions. The defensive posture that stops just short of weapon employment. But no shots fired, no missiles launched, no aircraft engaging. Because both sides understood the stakes. First shot triggers Article 5 NATO consultations. Economic sanctions. Potential escalation to nuclear threshold. Nobody wanted that outcome over boarding inspections in Taiwan Strait. So the confrontation became nautical chess match. USS Carl Vinson positioned herself between Chinese blockade line and commercial shipping lanes. Message clear: ships under U.S. protection continue transit. Chinese boarding operations stop or face American intervention. Chinese Type 055 destroyers maintained positions, refused to yield patrol line, continued directing Coast Guard boarding operations on non-U.S. vessels. Message equally clear: Chinese exercise continues regardless of U.S. presence. The standoff that persisted for 37 hours. Commercial shipping responded to military confrontation. 17 container ships diverted around Taiwan Strait entirely. Took longer southern route through Philippines. Added 1,200 miles and 4 days to transit. Insurance rates for Taiwan Strait passage increased 340% within 24 hours. The economic impact from exercise that never technically became blockade. If you're following this analysis of great power competition at sea, subscribe to Warfare Signal. We break down the confrontations that could spark wider conflict. The tactical situation evolved throughout December 14th and 15th. U.S. aircraft conducted freedom of navigation flights. FA-18 Super Hornets flying 500 feet above Chinese destroyers. Legal under international law. Provocative by any military standard. The peacetime harassment that demonstrates capability without triggering engagement. Chinese J-20 fighters scrambled in response, intercepted U.S. aircraft at 15,000 feet, maintained weapons-tight posture but established presence. The aerial confrontation that matched every American sortie with Chinese countermove. Underwater, the submarine game intensified. U.S. Navy maintains 2 Virginia-class attack submarines assigned to 7th Fleet. Chinese PLA Navy operates 12 nuclear attack submarines plus 40 diesel-electric submarines. The submerged forces that nobody discusses but everyone tracks. Acoustic sensors detected unusual activity. Hull-mounted sonar on destroyers going active. Anti-submarine helicopters deploying sonobuoys. Both sides searching for submarines they knew were there but couldn't precisely locate. The underwater dimension that adds lethal unpredictability to surface confrontation. Taiwan's military watched from 24 miles away. Air Force on alert. Navy confined to ports to avoid complicating situation. Army positioned along coast prepared for Chinese landing if blockade escalated to invasion. The observer that couldn't afford to remain neutral, but couldn't risk escalating either. Japan monitored from Okinawa. Maritime Self-Defense Force warships deployed to approaches. Fighter jets increased readiness status. The ally bound by mutual defense treaty, but hoping U.S. resolves confrontation alone. South Korea maintained distance. Officially neutral in Taiwan Strait disputes. Unofficially providing intelligence to U.S. forces. The partner trying to balance relations with both sides. The regional dynamics that complicate every tactical decision. Was this confrontation manageable crisis or rehearsal for actual blockade? Share your strategic assessment in the comments. The diplomatic channels worked overtime while warships faced off. State Department contacted Chinese Foreign Ministry, demanded immediate cessation of boarding operations, threatened sanctions if commercial shipping remained disrupted. Beijing responded that operations occur in Chinese waters under Chinese authority. Pentagon activated hotline to PLA Western Theater Command, requested deconfliction of forces to prevent accidental engagement. Chinese military officials assured no hostile intent, but refused to modify exercise parameters. White House convened National Security Council. Options presented: escalate with additional carrier strike groups, maintain current presence, withdraw to avoid confrontation. President chose option 2, hold position, but don't escalate further. The political decision that accepts standoff rather than risk conflict. December 15th, 6:00 p.m. Chinese Maritime Safety Administration announced completion of underwater cable maintenance. Navigation warning lifted. Commercial vessels cleared to resume normal routing. Chinese warships began dispersing from patrol lines. The exercise that ended on Chinese schedule regardless of U.S. presence. But Chinese Coast Guard maintained enhanced presence. Vessels remained in shipping lanes. Boarding authority claimed under maritime safety regulations. The permanent change disguised as temporary exercise. U.S. Carrier Strike Group held position additional 48 hours, demonstrating commitment to freedom of navigation. Then departed Taiwan Strait northward toward Japan. The message that America responds but doesn't occupy. Final tally from 37-hour confrontation: 47 merchant vessels boarded. Average delay: 3.7 hours per inspection. No cargo seized, no crew detained. But complete intelligence collected on commercial traffic patterns, cargo manifests, and shipping schedules. The dry run for actual blockade collected all data necessary for real operation. Support this level of detailed analysis by hitting that like button and subscribing to Warfare Signal for the strategic breakdowns mainstream media won't provide. Intelligence analysis revealed exercise objectives exceeded simple training. Chinese Navy demonstrated ability to establish patrol line enforced by guided missile destroyers. Coast Guard proved capability to board and delay commercial vessels. Air Force maintained combat air patrol protecting surface operations. Submarine force positioned for anti-submarine warfare. All elements of blockade except actual interdiction of cargo. More concerning, timing data. Chinese forces established exclusion zone in under 4 hours. Boarding operations began within 6 hours. Full blockade posture achieved in 8 hours. Taiwan has 0 strategic warning time if China decides real blockade. Economic modeling showed devastating impact. Taiwan imports 98% of energy, 70% of food, 68% of raw materials. Complete blockade would exhaust reserves in 47 days. Semiconductor production would halt in 31 days. Economic collapse would precede military defeat. The starvation strategy that achieves objectives without invasion. U.S. response doctrine faced hard questions. Can carrier strike group break blockade without triggering shooting war? Should America risk conflict over commercial vessel boardings? Will U.S. maintain permanent presence to deter future exercises? Pentagon planning assumed answers. But December 14th exercise proved assumptions need revision. Breaking blockade requires either destroying Chinese warships, which means war, or escorting every commercial vessel, which requires dedicating multiple carrier strike groups indefinitely. Neither option politically sustainable. The strategic dilemma China created through 37-hour exercise. Regional allies recalibrated threat assessments. Japan accelerated destroyer procurement. South Korea enhanced naval capabilities. Australia increased submarine orders. The arms race catalyzed by single exercise demonstrating new threat. China's blockade rehearsal achieved strategic communication without firing shot. Beijing demonstrated capability, collected intelligence, tested U.S. response, assessed international reaction. The perfect reconnaissance operation disguised as routine exercise. And most significantly, proved economic coercion viable alternative to military invasion. Quiz answer from earlier. How many merchant ships did China board during the 37-hour exercise? 47 vessels inspected with average delay of 3.7 hours, collecting complete intelligence on commercial traffic patterns for future blockade operations. 3 questions for you. Can U.S. maintain permanent presence deterring blockade? Will China conduct actual blockade or continue rehearsals? What happens when commercial shipping refuses Taiwan routes? December 14th. Exercise wasn't beginning of Taiwan crisis. It was methodical preparation for crisis China controls timing of. Beijing practiced blockade, tested U.S. response, measured economic impact, collected operational data. Next exercise will be more sophisticated, longer duration, broader scope. Each iteration brings China closer to operational capability. U.S. demonstrated commitment to freedom of navigation, deployed carrier strike group within hours, maintained presence throughout confrontation. The response that shows resolve but doesn't solve underlying problem. Because China doesn't need permission to exercise in waters it claims, U.S. can respond to each exercise but can't prevent next one. The initiative remains with Beijing. Taiwan watched exercise with growing alarm. Blockade requires no amphibious landing, no beach assault, no urban warfare, just naval vessels enforcing exclusion zone until economic collapse forces political capitulation. The existential threat that military force can't defend against. Subscribe to Warfare Signal, where we analyze the conflicts shaping tomorrow's headlines. Hit that notification bell because the strategic analysis we provide doesn't appear anywhere else. Chinese blockade capability continues improving. December 14th was 5th such exercise in 2024. Each one longer, more complex, more realistic. The rehearsals that become operational doctrine through repetition. U.S. response options remain limited. Military intervention risks war. Economic sanctions harm American interests. Diplomatic protest changes nothing. The strategic box with no clean exit. December 14th proved blockade remains viable strategy in precision weapon era. Economic coercion works when target depends on seaborne trade. Naval power projects force without territorial occupation. The warfare that achieves objectives below threshold of armed conflict. This is modern great power competition, not fought with invasions, but with naval exercises that aren't quite blockades. Economic pressure that isn't quite warfare. The confrontations that stay just below conflict threshold while achieving strategic objectives. The 47 merchant ships boarded in 37 hours. the carrier strike group that responded but couldn't prevent boarding operations. The exercise that ended on Chinese timeline regardless of U.S. presence.